going to have one last question. Brian, actually, down the back, had an interesting question about John's musical endeavour there. Or do we have someone else? Oh, yeah, Brian had asked me a question this morning.
Sean, for all your intellect and that, the hot press down through the years, the Eurovision, what's the story with it? It's a great opportunity to ask you. What's the attraction?
Well,
thanks, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, like, you see, I suppose that in right through my working life as a journalist, I've been fascinated by the fact that of coming on things that a huge prejudice surrounds, and actually beginning to try and interrogate this prejudice. I mean, I did this with Fianna Fáil. I mean, people think I'm a Fianna Fáiler because I write and I defend Fianna Fáilers in situations which are frankly often indefensible. But I find it interesting to do that. Like a lawyer, you know, I try and put out a case for the indefensible from time to time. But this I came to because I grew up in a Fine Gael family. You know, I was wrote in Driving at the Crossroads, like, you know, that I was born a blue shirt. Still am, naturally. But but what fascinated me about it was to actually see them when I grew up, the sense of that in me there was this hatred of Fianna Fáilers, hatred of De Valera, even though I knew very little about them, and that these were my neighbours. And I became fascinated by this, particularly when I came to Dublin and saw in journalism that the same kind of passions, hatreds, were still there, but they were actually covered up with a kind of an objectivity. And so I started to explore in myself what were these passions and how could I overcome them. And that's how I started to move towards Fianna Fáil and trying to, you know, and in Driving at the Crossroads, that sort of opened up my thinking about a lot of things. So I kind of come to the Eurovision and think, why should people think it's intelligent to slag off the Eurovision? Like, you know, why? Like, because, you know, it doesn't really, you don't need to be clever to do it. I mean, anybody can see that it's a load of bollocks. But it's a fun load of bollocks, right? And so I thought, well, like, why not, you know, and what actually happened was, I mean, as a kid I used to write songs with this guy from home. And we had a band, and we used to make demo tapes on cassette players and all that. And then he was kind of a child prodigy, but then he went straight and became an engineer, and he disappeared. I didn't see him for about 25 years. But about 5 or 6 years ago, he contacted me again, and he'd been writing songs with his father-in-law. And you can imagine what that's like. So he was desperately looking for me to come back and try and, you know, would I write some more songs with him? So I said I would, you know. But then we wrote a few songs, we cranked up again, but then we had nothing to do with the songs. And I thought, well, why can't we let's enter Eurovision. Let's try and get in Eurovision, just to see if we can do it. And there was a series of outrages, you know. In the first year we got in, there was a huge stitch-up, because Brian Kennedy was, or, you know, it was all orchestrated that he would win with his own song, and I kicked up blue murder about that. And the next year, then, we entered again, and this year we won. That they kind of got off to a dervish, and then we came last, and blah, blah, blah. And then, again, this year we got through. So, like, to me, it's fun. And what I find as you go older, you see, I don't care about being... Ryan Tubridy said to me there last year, he was interviewing me, he says, don't you care about not being cool? And I said, I'm 53 years of age. Why should I care about being cool? Like, what is cool? I mean, he thinks cool is imitating somebody else. You know, I think cool is maybe trying to do something new, or doing your own thing, or being yourself. And so it's just something, you know. And I also, it's an amazingly interesting experience when you actually go into it, to actually see all these countries, artists who are actually very talented, good singers, good musicians, good dancers, really at the top of their game, competing in a very passionate way, particularly since the Eastern Europeans came into it. Because you know, there's a really interesting cultural study there in the way that they've discovered pop music and have rattled through the whole history of pop music in about 10 years. And picked out bits of it and combined them with their own folk musics, and created sounds which each country, that's what the whole so-called voting bloc is about. It's that they like each other's music. It's nothing to do with politics at all. And it's got to do with their diaspora, because their diaspora comes here to Ireland and votes for Poland and Latvia and Lithuania, and we just sit in our arses complaining, you know, while they vote for their own countries. And then we wonder how we're not winning. Well, hello. You know, like, So I just find it interesting. And as I say, as I grow older, I don't give a fuck like what anybody thinks. And it's a great liberation.
Okay, John Waters, you have a book coming out next week. What's it called?
It's called Beyond Consolation. The subtitle is How We Became Too Clever for God and Our Own Good.
Who's publishing it?
Continuum, an English and New York company. But it's about hope and desire in the human psyche and how they're expressed culturally. And is it possible, as a human being now, to live a life in hope without medication?
John Waters, thank you very much.